So I'm Page Duashte, Suzanne Kite, or Kite Amatiapi, Los Angeles, and Montreal, Humataha. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Kite. I also go by my last name, Kite. And I am from Los Angeles. I just moved from Montreal. I'm from Southern California. I'm Oglala Lakota. I am coming to you now from the Muscogee Creek Nation, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I am now a fellow in the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. I am a PhD candidate at the Concordia University in Montreal, and I hold a couple other fellowships right now. But so at my center, I am a composer, but I do performance art, installation. I make film and sculpture. I'm currently working on really big carbon fiber sculptures with my partner, Devin Ronneberg, and I'll try to sketch out some of my current work and work that I'm working on right now. I co-run a record label, Unheard Records, with Mint Park, and I generally, my practice is researching Lakota ontology and artificial intelligence heavily, as well as right now I'm doing a lot of research on how Indians and the paranormal are connected. Okay, I'll do a little presenting. So a lot of my work has to do with body interfaces. So this is one of my multitude of body interfaces, which I make sure are very simple and have mostly to do with movement and affect sound and video. This is a hair-based interface, which I made for a piece called Listener, where I connect my hair with the computational system. I make a lot of work when I'm now kind of returning to this about maps and land and the perception of scientific perception of land versus my perception of land. This is from a piece called Everything I Say Is True. I'm going to show a little video of a section of Listener, and Listener is a piece with machine learning where I have the hair braid interface on, and I am, it's a circular system where I'm watching this video and listening to some radio frequencies and police scanners, and I make decisions on how to move by watching this video, and then the hair braid interface controls a synthesizer, and the synthesizer is listened to by a Wekinator algorithm, and then that controls the video, and I watch the video and decide how to move. So I'm going to play a little thing of that.
Is that your registered owner, William McGonigal?
Avenue. Your cross street will be of Langstaff Drive. You're going for a male, 87 years of age, had a fall, hit his head, and
biometric.
He fell down
Biometric.
Biometric.
Simultaneously transmitting as receiving data, simultaneously transmit of other listeners in stories traded for carbon. Whispers that they desire bind tab or evasion techniques will stay in these cities because they cannot. Most survivors will stay in these cities because they cannot. All shapes of them must live together like one saw, throw seen into the spirit, and the shapes of all shapes of them must live together like one hoop that made one circle. Wide as daylight. Sacred hoop of my people was one of many. Wide as daylight.
So I'll leave that there. All this stuff is on my Vimeo and on my website if you want to listen more. Very listening-based practice. So in this piece, there's a lot going on, but you do see some of these Lakota geometric shapes, which are generally made by women. And I know you're having Sadie Redwing, and who's super expert in that. I love her work. So some other things on here, which I won't play, is a piece where I work with the idea of Minkowski's light cone and the formation of land, both real and not real. And I'll come back to my presentation. Okay. I also do I have a piece which I want to revisit, which is about different forms of memorabilia. And this is a collection of, this is my Pocahontas toy collection from my childhood. I had a very large collection of it. My rave memorabilia collection, and I was in Indian Princesses, which is a YMCA father-daughter activity thing. And so in this installation, there is a chat room, which is a sonified chat room. So it makes music as you type in the chat room, which people can hear the music worldwide. I'm going to show a couple more pieces before I move on to research. So this is a recent piece with, which is a collaboration with Nathan Young, who's also a Tulsa Artist Fellow, which I'm very excited about. We're continuing to work on this and release it as a vinyl. Hopefully it's not too crazy noise. Sorry, it's very abrasive. It's that that's a piece sonifying it's sonifying where we are. So he was in Tulsa and I was in Los Angeles, and we're trying to do all these different phenomenological sonic techniques to sonify the electrical grid in order to attempt to listen to the source of that electricity. I'm going to play one more, and it's a recording with the score from the piece, a collaboration with Althea Thalberger, which was a commission for the Toronto Biennial. And in this piece, you hear a conch shell sextet, which is a sextet that is a part of the HMCS York Royal Navy Band in Toronto. Short snippet really doesn't do it justice because it's a long form piece. There's 4 of those pieces, and one of them you can listen to on here. And the other thing I want to point out is I'm working on where is it? Too many videos. I'm doing a practice now that when people hire me to do like commissions without a commission budget, I usually take that money and split it with a cousin of mine. Oh, here it is. Corey Stover, who's my collaborator, and I think with him, and we started to do these things where we just record our conversations. Either we record our conversation. I did one where for Mountain Standard Time Festival where we recorded a conversation about the use of, in Lakota culture, we eat cake at funerals, and we have a second funeral a year later, the drying of the tears, and we had a conversation about that while I decorated a cake. And then recently he taught me a lullaby, and I recorded that. Those are some of the things you can listen to. So I will just briefly outline my academic stuff. There's a lot of it. I really recommend this piece, Making Humans and Machines, which we won an award for with the Journal of Design Science at MIT, which is a collaboration between Jason Edward Lewis, Noelani Arista, Archie Pachowis, and myself. And this is part of a larger project of Indigenous protocols and artificial intelligence. To me, this practice is rooted in the Dakota philosopher Vine Deloria Jr.'s quote about respect, that respect involves 2 attitudes. One is the acceptance of self-discipline, to act responsibly towards other forms of life, and the other attitude is to seek to establish communications and covenants with other forms of life on a mutually agreeable basis. And that is the core right now of a lot of my practice. So of course I veer off into stuff that seems, I don't know, I like to play with both manipulation of the audience and maybe something more like exploration of, I like to explore belief, but I also like to try to make truth and make sense of truth. If you're interested in this stuff, I was able to, it's on my website. I interviewed my grandfather, Nazi, and it's called It's Not Done Through Our Mind, It's Done Through Our Spirit. And we talked about listening to stones, which is a very big, huge, important practice in Lakota religion. And that listening to stones is very embedded in the idea of working with machine learning, making computational systems, because those systems are made of real materials, which are mined from real places. And Lakota ontology is very much set up to make relationships with those and to enact those ethical protocols, those ethical processes in both art creation and design, et cetera. And so this piece, Eon EA Telling Rock, which is a collaboration between my partner Devin Ronneberg and myself, is kind of our first attempt at working through this and maybe a positive direction, because we have other types of work. But this piece it's got hand soldered circuits. It's again Wekinator-based machine learning. Hairbraid. This is a view from below. And right now this is installed in Santa Fe at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, and it's about to go on tour in Australia. And this is based on a dream my grandfather had. We worked with my cousin to develop a protocol for listening, and this is what we heard more or less. But if you're a composer, you know that the sonic is coming from somewhere, it's emerging from somewhere, from beyond, from inside, from this unknowable place. And so this is part of what we were working on with that. Here's a view from the side, installed at Bemis Center. Here is Corey and myself doing a ceremony underneath it. Okay, so the bulk of the work that I've kind of the AI stuff is now published in completion on indigenousaI.net for this position paper published through CFAR, the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. A huge document, highly recommend it. And in that, my contribution piece, besides being the global organizer, I think I was also credited as a assistant editor. It was this piece, How to Build Anything Ethically, which is in discussion with some family members, Corey Stover and Melita Stover Janice, and my friend and collaborator, Scott Benison Abandan, and illustrated by Kari Noe. And in this piece, I am using this Lakota concept of a good way, which is sometimes heard the good red road. And I'm trying to find ways to transfer that into a computational design process. Again, that's centered on the fact that stones you can have ethical relationships with stones because our ontology accepts that they can be animate beings. So in this, I propose how to build a physical computing device in a Lakota way. And you can read this in depth, but part of what I'm doing, a little comparative thing, looking at how do we build a sweat lodge in a good way, and maybe how to build a physical computing device in which to house an AI in a good way, which is based on this idea I'm proposing about protocol streams, where each stream, a little stream of protocol, is made of things like consultations with elders, with knowledge holders, identifying stakeholders, which are not just stockholders, raw materials, super important, compensation for those things. And there's other writings in that position paper about modes of compensating, methods of compensation, building the base, preparing components, construction. Everything can be done in a good way. Running, transformation, which is really key, and I hope to expand on that more. Welcoming, super important to name and welcome and say that you have created an AI that's doing X, Y, and Z. Running it, and then the death cycle, most important to me. If it doesn't have a death cycle, it's not ethical. And then I imagine this together with, so if you're making one AI, even if we haven't pinned down what exactly that means, all these things can and should be done. Governance of that, data collection, physical, compensation, distribution, use, software, coding, can be done in an ethical way. Here's a quote from my grandfather. I believe this about stones. When one comes to you, whenever it rolls to you, or whenever it's right in front of you, that it's there for a purpose. Here to teach your spirit about something so that maybe what it teaches you, you can use to help someone else. Some new work. 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left. Some new work. This was fabricated by my partner Devin Ronneberg. It's totally unfinished. It's going to be installed, and it's a MAC in Montreal, and it's where the MAC intersects Macaonia, which is the space in South Dakota where the Lakota people understand we emerged from the earth. And here I've started to use, I've used a lot of USGS data before, but where the wall, trying to make it perceptible that the wall of the museum is actually intersecting the USGS data. And so I have a bunch of these sculptures that hopefully will really look like they're popping out of the wall. So I'm really excited about that. Some other things that I'm working on are obviously my dissertation, which currently, you know, how if you've done a dissertation, you know that they change. So right now it's called Helchanko Ki and Kapaya, and it's There Lies the Road, How to Make Art in a Good Way. And so in this, I'm really trying to understand what is the definition of ethical creation of artwork using AI through developing protocols based on Lakota ontologies. And in this, I'm working on designing some field studies, for example, getting a group of Indigenous people, not just Lakota people, together to try to co-design and collaboratively make some artwork with wearable interfaces. Another one is to go and record in a small group discussions and songwriting sessions with and through stones with other Lakota composers. And then maybe a third field study would be, which will happen anyway, may or not be part of the dissertation, where I'm going to collaborate with the Rosebud Boys and Girls Club, and we will be using machine learning tools probably like Runway ML to take photographs and then process those and see what the youth are doing with machine learning these days and how they perceive that. Some other things I'm working on are some LAPD helicopter surveillance modeling with a collaborative group. Wrote a paper that should come out soon about, it's an article on Indigenous film ontologies. I just interviewed for Sound American, which hasn't come out yet, haven't finished it yet, Scott Minnesota Bandan about his piece, which will be at the MAC as well, about Anishinaabe listening ontologies. And in my last 2 minutes, I'm going to read something I wrote yesterday, which is I haven't finished it yet, but hopefully this weekend I'll finish this paper called What's on the Earth is in the Stars and What's in the Stars is on the Earth, which is about extraterrestrials and American conspiracy. So I'll take my last 2 minutes to do this. I'm testing out what it happens when it comes out of my mouth. Okay. Understanding extraterrestrials as a product of American mythology requires seeing the multiplicity of blurry facets of this idea. Just like the hydra of conspiracy that is America, the intersections of extraterrestrials in America fracture into even more intricate pieces of an unsolvable puzzle. And my research is organized as facets with little red strings seen through a kaleidoscope, because that is how conspiracies are structured. The truth is nearly impossible to pin down. The soul of the non-Indigenous white American can never fully settle or rest until it fully owns the land they call America. It cannot rest until becoming Indigenous. This desire and quest for indigeneity is a quest for a new religion and maybe a new mythology. Stories that are formed and reformed through traumatic apocalyptic events which defy human comprehension. The fear of the unknown grows closer and closer in America, a fear which shapeshifts, haunts, and terrorizes like a being in the dark. In diving deep into extraterrestrial Lakota mythology, it becomes clear that the lines between contemporary Lakota relations and extraterrestrials are blurred with New Age American ufology, as seen in the writings of Ehanamini and speeches of Chief Golden Eagle. It also becomes clear that the history of American ufology is deeply intertwined with the history of nuclear warfare. While the great American fear changes faces, a powerful threat to humanity is still the bomb and its endless radiating materials, which kill and continue to kill for millennia to come. The factual basis for nuclear fear can connect many of these conspiracy dots, but not all of them. is the terror of grappling with the unknown, which unites all of these conspiratorial trains of thought. As a Lakota woman, I know that the unknown is sacred, and when faced with the unknown, I have a toolkit to face death, sorrow, and confusion. However, the non-Indigenous white settler American, the tools are few and do not reflect ancient relationships to the land and the sky in this place called America. Does evil need to be fictionalized and transformed, characterized, to be grappled with? So that's what I worked on yesterday. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kite. That was wonderful. So now we're ready to open up for questions. Please feel free to either type your questions into the chat, or you can also use the hand raising feature. If you're not familiar with it, you would click on the participants icon and you should be able to see an option to raise your hand. And we would very much love and welcome if you want to raise your hand, and I can call your name and you can ask your question by speaking into the space.
Sure, that was all crystal clear. I have questions.
So I have a question. I actually have many, but I will just do one right now. So my question comes from thinking about the different kinds of symbolism that is associated with stones and with hair in maybe different perspective of the American culture, but mostly maybe the mainstream white American culture. How I think this is kind of a question relating to how do you, like as an artist, navigate that? Because based on your presentation, I grasped that the meaning and the message carried with the stones is extremely different and highly nuanced in a Lakota context, and that might not be read in such a way when you present things in a museum or even in an academic context. So how do you personally work through that?
I think I've only had real feedback from a German, no, it was an Austrian audience about the hair stuff. I've had the pleasure of presenting my work in Canada amongst Indigenous audiences where it's logical to think about hair as an extension of the human body, and stones, the cultures there also have relationships with stones. And then I also had the real big pleasure of showing this at Racing Magpie Gallery in Rapid City, where family came and understood, and which was really great. I've only had a few funny comments, like in Austria, somebody said like they saw I had 50 feet of hair braid. This guy was like, I also collect my hair. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant. But I generally try not to worry about, I'm actively trying to reorient myself and to think through Lakota ontology. I mean, the beginning of the hair braid and less the stones, but the hair braid stuff was thinking, asking myself in a 7th generation character design workshop with the Initiative for Indigenous Futures. The question was, what tool does my 7th generation self or descendant need? And if they had an extension of their body in order to receive transmissions, it's very quick logic in the Lakota ontology to say the end logic is a hair braid. It's already understood as an extrasensory tool. So I haven't gotten any weird perceptions of hair. I have gotten some great there was a show I was in where people, where the curator paired me with, I was paired with a African artist who uses hair, and I felt that was beautiful pairing, and I understood it was like it wasn't the same ontology, but there was an understanding across the ontologies.
Thank you. That made a lot of sense. I'm going to read John's question here in the chat. So following up on Xing's question, I am really interested in the notion of listening to stones. Could you please elaborate on that and how it manifests itself in the work? Does this extend to the Lakota practice of listening in general?
Yes, definitely. One of the books I always turn to when thinking about Lakota practices of listening is Sievert Young Bear's Standing in the Light. I always think listening in the light or seeing it as standing in the light, which is, he's a drum group leader, and he always talks about the body. He says, we never dance without singing, we rarely sing without dancing, because that is the way, when we ask how is knowledge made, and a lot of the times indigenous cultural knowledge, or indigenous philosophy is reduced to, oh, they make art, it's just art, or the term, like, there's no word for art in our language, but it's because it's a different epistemology. There's a different way of making knowledge, and that is through the body. That's why we see a lot of our philosophy, and I'm sure Sadie Redwin will talk about this, but about the how the design or the visual has this, there's so much information packed in there in order to trigger all the right storytelling at the right time, because listening is extremely embodied. And that's why it's so great to be doing a research creation-based PhD in Canada, where that is, I can start a little closer to where I'm trying to go. And so when you're listening to stones, and I think about the way that the Lakota ceremonial world is set up, that stones are very much the center of that always. We need stones, we need their transformative existence, their transformative beings in order to communicate with the rest of the universe and many other universes. Maybe we need their those qualities, and we understand how old they are. And I've been doing all this research for this extraterrestrial stuff about the what's on this earth in the skies type stuff, where there's these ideas of how we're creating vortexes with our homes and with our ceremonies and those vortexes, if we do them correctly, are reflected in the by spirits in the other world, and therefore and at the center of those, every center is stones. We need those stones in order to communicate. And I think that's, it's reflected all throughout the ethics too. You need the earth in order to live, and et cetera, et cetera.
I have a short question. This might be a very straightforward or naive question, but your work, while very digital, has a lot of very physical and bodily performative components. Have you created work that exists online only, or can you express some of the work that you're doing in any kind of digital platform, or even just purely web-based platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that what I found, interestingly, I'm like a very digital person, and I've never been really, I'm a performance artist. I actually didn't show any of like the stuff with on the body stuff. I don't know. You guys can go watch me flail around. I don't want to watch it today. I'm not one of those performance artists who's like, it's only in my body. It can only live in my body. I understand with moving to the full Zoom thing, I think my practice has transitioned well. I think that the work with that's over the web with my cousin Corey, who I can't visit right now because our borders are closed and have been for a while. I feel like our relationship as collaborators, cousins, he's my traditional brother, like all of that stuff has transitioned well to the being on the web. And I think that those videos and like recorded telephone conversations live really well. And I also believe that even though I have that installation, It's Better Off Alone, it's called, where people are typing, even though that's only web-based, even though it has an installation location, it really lives in the person who's on the other end of the Discord chat room, like listening to the weird drum and bass. I think that at the center of my practice is very much this transmission idea of how knowledge gets moved across diasporic spaces, because I consider myself a diasporic Lakota, and I still receive knowledge, and I can still make new knowledge even separated. And I think that ability for epistemes to live across is cool and workable, and being on the land is definitely number one, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Jaslyn, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. I want to say, first of all, thank you for being here with us. It's always good to have more diverse perspectives in this space. And I wanted to ask, I'm interested in hearing more about your work with Indigenous AI. I was wondering if you could speak more in depth about your process and how you approach this topic, considering that AI can be such a problematic topic these days. I think I have another question following that. And I also wanted to know how do you imagine a more liberated and equitable future with AI, one that contributes to the flourishing of all humans and non-humans, like stated on the indigenousai.net website?
Yeah, great question. I would love to elaborate. Here are some links to the position paper and everything. So many pages to go through there. So the way I'm thinking about Indigenous AI right now is indigeneity is really, really, really multifaceted. We have at least minimum 500 and something tribes just in the US. And, there are so many languages and epistemologies and viewpoints. And what happened in the Indigenous AI workshop, when we brought as many people as we could together, we found it was really interesting is where we disagreed, where the Maori group they were already they were really technically, they were way far ahead of all the rest of us. They had already built some really cool AI stuff, but they were like, oh, we're going to make Maori AI elders, and they're going to live in a mountain, and they can only be accessed through a long, strenuous hike, and you can. And that was woo, scary to other people. Like I don't want to make an AI elder. I can't. I'm not ready to That's crazy. But because they have they are going to be so in my AI future. In my ethical AI future, there are so many types of Indigenous AI. There are many, many, many types of Lakota AIs, plural, plural, plural. And in them, we're able to practice, my one sculpture, it is just a very sad, weak, minuscule attempt, pitiful attempt, or pitiful. Lakotas consider themselves pitiful compared to other animals. We need so much help. And in that, I think that there's going to be such a big multiplicity. So I think with what can be contributed is, first of all, understanding that I hope my contribution to the AI stuff is that the problem is an ontological problem. The problem is who gets to be a being. And we can try to reform AI all we want, but it's not going to work because you have to go below the linguistics even, but the very bottom line ontological problem. if stones can't, if anything in the world is possessible and ownable, then everything is possessible and ownable. Then the entire earth is ownable and destroyable and sellable. So if we have to start somewhere else. So, and as many, I always consider my grandfather really good, like proselytizer. He's always like, everyone should become, like, adopt our ideas, you know, join the club of ethical frameworks.
Thank you. I love the fact that you're including like the discussion of like humans and non-humans and like it all being connected, some type of energy. And if, like you said, one thing can be used, then like it all can be used. And like, how are we using each other as a part of like a web or an ecosystem? Thank you.
Questions? I will say I'm working on a really fun I forgot I wanted to say this, that I'm working on some workshops with Alicia Wormsley, who is an awesome artist I went to school with, and she makes those There Are Black People in the Future billboards. And we're working on some futuring workshops where we'll try to we're going to dream like Afrofuturist and Indigenous futurist futures together. So excited for that. Thinking about like reparations and land and food sovereignty. Yeah, I'm not a very qualified futurist, but I'm learning how to future.
Related to, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Sheen. Kite, I'm Sven. I apologize, my video isn't working. I'm not purposely staying invisible. First of all, come do a workshop with us. I'm just absolutely loving listening to you talk, and there's just such, I just have 100 ideas after your brief stop over at a number of your pieces. I have a question to ask about your working process. And I think a couple other people have kind of touched upon this already, but I want to ask it. And that's, you know, you have a really interesting breadth of work ranging from writing and research to installation pieces to I guess what we would call physical installations, performance. Can you talk about how you decide what form to work in? All of your work seems kind of richly intertwined, but I'm curious about when you decide to write and when you decide to do visual stuff. How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if there are students listening, it's like I loathe being told that you should focus on one thing, so I don't. I say I do the medium based on who's going to pay. You know, if they want, I'll basically do whatever. If you want me to tap dance, I'll tap dance. If you want a paper, you want an article that looks like if I have an idea and it's never gotten to be done yet, then I'm there, I'm applying, and I'm going to figure out how to make the idea flourish in that space. So I have had the opportunity to do installations. I would like the opportunity to do more installations. You know, it's interesting being a composer. I never get to compose because there's no budget for compositions. You know, it's like, you know, no one paying 7 musicians is a lot. So, you know, a lot of time I find that writing gets a lot of, easy to fund a piece of writing. And I find it's very easy for me to interview my friends and family who are geniuses, and they just need to be asked about their genius ideas. So when I decide, but some things I have like a mega list of projects that I want to do and ideas that I have, and then I'm just waiting for the right email to be like, oh, we got a little bit of money, and then I'm like, okay, I'll spend 7 times that in order to make this project come to fruition, because yeah. So that's how I work. I say yes to everything and no to very few things. I will say more about Unheard Records. So Unheard Records, unheardrecords.org is an experimental label. We are so busy, Mint and I are so busy and have been for so many years that we don't give it as much love as it needs, but we have some amazing compilations and we have some amazing records with people, and I really recommend everybody else's albums. I put in an album there recently. So hard to put out your own music. And Mint does the podcast, Ghost Frequency, and we do open submissions often and just try to get people's work out there. And we really focus on queer, non-binary, people of color. We really want to focus on the idea of unheardness and that the weirdest experimental electronic music and get it out there, because I'm tired of seeing the same people at festivals.
Another question I wanted to ask is whether you can elaborate a little more about the good way of creating physical computing that you touched on in that chart.
Yeah, so a good way is a Lakota term, and the way I think about it in the chart is, well, the way I think about it is that it's applicable to anything. And it's actually, I'm not a designer, but I see that in design, it is possible to introduce methodologies like this and execute them. And in the art world and in my arts education, and especially music, they don't teach you ethics. There's no even discussion of ethics. Like postmodernism happened, and then we can no one needs to be ethical anymore. You can make whatever art you want to make, and it'll sell, and that's encouraged by the United States art market. So, and that's a symptom of a larger problem, ontological problem, obviously. But when I see, when I hear about a good way, another way to think about, I also think about Siebert Youngbear, the way he approaches it is that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. There's a right way to do ceremony, and there's a wrong way to do ceremony. And if we live our lives, if we think of the world like my ancestors did not that long ago, where everything is ceremonial and it's possible to do things. It is possible to do things in a good way all the time, and it's harder now, that's for sure. But when I think about AI, that's why when I had Kari design those flows of rivers into one body of water, AI is interchangeable. It's possible to make anything in that way. And if you can't do it, then you probably shouldn't do it. And but that's not to say that I'm not interested in experimenting across the borders of that. One of the projects I'm working on right now is a film called Seeing is Believing, tentatively called Seeing is Believing, with Devin Ronneberg, my partner, and we just completed a Sundance, a New Frontiers lab on it, where we're trying to use all the most unethical tools to try to make something else. And we're using deep faking, AI speech, I don't know what else, GPT-2, text generation, using all those tools and seeing how we can exploring how deeply messed up they are. But like, what happens if I put Jeff Bezos' face on a war criminal? What happens? Like, does something happen conceptually? Is that wrong? I think it might be wrong, but I won't know till I make the artwork. So I'm interested in those borders outside of a good way as well.
I think we might have time to take one more question. So if anyone has a last question, please type into the chat or unmute yourself.
If it's okay, I'd like to ask a question, Shin.
Please.
Okay. So hi, my name is Bex. I guess I had a question Kite, about your collaboration process, because I know you talked about how you collaborate with your cousin and you also have a partner. How do you go about like creating work where you collaborate? And how do you think it can be like a pro and con for your work? Like, do you feel that there's ever a time where you wish you would have done something alone?
Yeah, it took me a long time to be comfortable collaborating because it's cutthroat out there to try to get anywhere. And so once I was really uncomfortable doing it, and I would work with my partner and my friends, and I would have them, be fabricators, and like technical assistants. And then once I felt like my name was kind of out there and my ideas were appreciated and I had a body of work, then I started to, be like open to working like that. But that's with like men, I want to make sure I protect, my art practice and know that it's mine and that I am the intellectual center of that. And then with family, I am small and I know very little, and it is my goal to make sure that their ideas get recognition, and that even if I'm the writer, that it's very clear that it's in collaboration with or an interview of, because most Indigenous knowledge, we're not considered philosophers. I mean, name like one Indigenous philosopher that's considered a philosopher by the broader world. And now that I think of it like that, and people also get on me about using words like big ontology and epistemology and inaccessible language, but I don't think it's inaccessible because we already do all those things. And calling my family philosophers like they are is very important to me, and uplifting their work. So, I think that I'm less of a collaboration. I'm a facilitator of their knowledge, and I love and appreciate them for that. But for for like friends I collaborate with the New Red Order, collaborated with Nathan Young, and I've collaborated with my partner, and Althea Thalberger. That's what I was trying to think of. I always make sure that the people I'm collaborating with, I have huge gaps in my skills. Like, I do not know how to solder. But then it's a question of, am I bringing someone on just to solder, or am I bringing my partner on to solder and design in a way that they understand the ethics and they're moving that through their own decision-making process too. I'm not making tech demos, and I always remind myself of that. I'm making artwork, and though other people have so much to bring, I could not remotely have done that piece with Althea without Althea. Though she gives me too much credit for making the composition, she needs so much credit for being able to speak with the Navy, to like talk to them at all. I don't have that. I don't want to. That's terrifying. So, but we made something special because we have different skill sets. So that's my 2 cents on collaborating.
I'm just gonna repeat what Bex said in the chat. I love how you said that you are a facilitator for your family's knowledge. Thank you so much. And I want to echo that sentiment. What is the best way for us to stay updated with your work?
Yep, so my website is kite4times.com, and I have a newsletter, which thanks to my wonderful research and studio assistant, Bettina Perez, it gets sent out every month, and you can follow me on there, and on Instagram. On Instagram, I think it's Kite 5 times in a row.
Thank you so much, Kite. So to follow a little bit of Cloud Salon tradition, I am going to ask everybody to unmute your mic right now. And we are going to do a little snapping sound to thank Kite for being here with us.